Dimensions of Excellence, Christian Education at its Best, is presented by Dr. George H. Akers. Dr. Akers has devoted over 40 years to Christian education and is noted as a dynamic, thought-provoking, and insightful teacher and leader. Dr. Akers draws on his wide experience as teacher, principal, college president, School of Education professor and dean, and currently, director of one of the largest church-related school systems in the world. The material in this video series has been presented in various forms at teachers' conventions and seminars throughout the world, where Dr. Akers has shared his vision for Christian education with thousands of educators. This is the first tape of the 6-part video series, Dimensions of Excellence, Christian Education at its Best. Here now is Dr. Akers.
On my office wall in the basement are 2 pieces of paper. One, our family takes a great deal of pride on. My deceased father worked his way from cabin boy to captain, took examinations at every port of call along the way, from the age 13 up through 30, from one level on to the other, till finally his last piece of paper said, Captain Hilary Bogle Akers, master of ships and oceans, entitled to sail any boat, any size, in any waters of the world. The PhD of the maritime, and he earned it on deck, on shipboard along the way. Alongside of it is another set of papers, not nearly as prestigious in my mind, or represent the kind of devotion and work. It's my doctorate from the University of Southern California. Both of them are licenses to sail in waters. My professional paper is the same as yours. It says that you are a credentialed teacher, that I am a credentialed teacher, and that it's safe for us to be in a classroom with a group of children and youth, because we understand how children grow and learn. We understand the dynamics of instruction, managing a classroom and organizing subject matter and mediating that whole instructional endeavor that's going on there. The mere professional is the lowest level on the 5 steps to the throne. The sad part is that there are teachers who think with their thumbs in their lapels that when they have become truly efficient in the classroom, on top of their subject matter, that they are competent and professional, that they have arrived. Christian schools do not settle for low-level instruction. There are 4 levels beyond that Christian churches, Christian families, parents, and members expect of a Christian teacher. To be a Christian teacher, one has to go far beyond the mere professional. And training schools for Christian teachers do not settle at the low-level expectancy. There is other macro work to do, another magnitude higher. The professional has merely earned his right to sail in those waters. To spend 6 to 8 hours a day with teenagers or children, to give them a view of life that is distinctly Christian. 6 hours a day just for the excuse of being able to rub shoulders with kids, to share your values with them, to interact with them, to model your thinking, your lifestyle, and your view of what it means to be a human being on this earth, under God, a member of the royal family of the universe. All of that piece of paper just means that you've been licensed to sail in those waters, those academic seas. We do not settle for that. Beyond that comes another very important second step, which in itself is almost a kind of a quantum leap. Because if you and I see a student as a little teapot with a lid on top, and we open it up and we pour in the information. The teacher sees the student as a walking knowledge container, and their task is to fill up that vessel with bits and pieces of information, or in some cases it may be skills combined. Do you see that student as a candidate for immortal honors? Do you see that student as a registrant in the school of the hereafter? Do you see that student as your own child? You are a surrogate parent. You suffer when that child suffers. You rejoice when that child gets ahead. Is there any student in your school that rubs you the wrong way and you want to put him or her in his or her place? That they got to come up and do? That they're too big for their britches? They're smart alecky or bully or snobbish or vain or just plain distasteful to get along with, and you're going to cut them down a notch or two? Would you feel that way if it were your own son or daughter? A Christian teacher is a surrogate parent who, in all the demeanor and the relationship with students, sends a signal which says, I relate to you as if you were my own child. I will never quietly say to myself in rejoicing, aha, he finally got what was coming to him. Or I'm laying for you, buddy. One false step and I'm around the corner and I'll get you. Young people have their antenna out with all systems go. And they can read the most subtle signals. And they're looking for somebody who truly is an extension of mom and dad. When the home and the school begin pulling together, communicating together, having common objectives, reinforcing each other without conflict and collision and dissonance, it is a powerful security and molding power for students. I think I told you once, another time, that'll bear repeating here. I was on a faculty once where one of the faculty members only came to faculty meeting when there was a discipline case on. She brought her knitting along, and as the dean or the principal recited the particular case at hand, her knitting needles would pick up speed as the plot thickened. It was almost as if she were sitting on the front seat of the Roman Colosseum and she was witnessing one of the gladiatorial struggles, you know, thumbs up or thumbs down. Do we get them or we don't? It was high entertainment. It was high drama. And occasionally she would ejaculate with a self-righteous hump. Serves her right, the little hussy. I've been watching her flip her skirts around this campus at all the boys. So she finally got what she wanted, did she? It was a tragic moral lapse. The faculty was very grave and sobered as they considered just how to relate to this. And then her final pronouncement was to the faculty, almost ex cathedra. My father always said that a bad apple spoils the basket. And the sooner we get the likes of her out of here, the better off we'll be. You know, it was just like a big cloud of carbon dioxide over an open flame. Just smothered all discussion, all thought. It was a pronouncement from on high, pontification. And in the shocked silence that followed, young Bible teacher didn't intend it for everybody to hear. Sitting nearby, he looked over to her and he said, we'll call her Mrs. X. That's probably as good a cover as we can use, be professional and anonymous. He said, Mrs. X, if that were your daughter, and you have 3 daughters within a year or two of her age, would you be making that speech? My friends, it was like watching the tide go out of the Bay of Fundy. She blanched absolutely white. Bad enough to have a moment of truth like that under your covers with them pulled over your head and in your bedroom with the lights out or in your closet. But to have a moment of truth like that before all of your colleagues. It hit her like a ton of bricks when she suddenly had it so forcibly and inescapably burned into her mind that until she loved that child like her own daughter, she was unfit to deal with her case. The parental. I love you just as if you were my own boy. You don't have to say it. The nonverbal communication comes through. Anthropologists tell us that there are 10 primary message systems. Only one of them is oral. The other 9 are all nonverbal. Body language, distance, management of time and space and furniture and symbols, and we could go on. There's a whole science, social psych involved in it. The nonverbal communication is, I'm your warden, I'm your caretaker, I'm your overseer, I'm merely your instructor, but the teacher who says, I'm involved in your life. I care about the character you're developing. I care about what's happening in your growth. I remember, and you'll pardon another homey illustration, I was in the 5th grade. How I loved to draw airplanes. Oh, I had bombers, and I had fighters, and I had sport planes, and I had experimental planes, and I would draw them with dihedral up and dihedral down, and I had all kinds of combinations, and horses and sailboats, and it always came during math class. And my teacher said, well, George, if you want to spend your time drawing during arithmetic class, you can do arithmetic after school. I felt so put upon. I watched the winter sun go down, heard my dog whining at the door, wanting me to come out and play soccer. I felt I was being persecuted. For 3 weeks, we went into a waiting contest to see who would break down first. And I doodled in arithmetic class, and I doodled after school, and we didn't get arithmetic done. She stayed a couple times until 6 o'clock. You talk about devotion. As I look back on that, she certainly went beyond the call of duty, maybe even beyond the call of parenthood. But then one night, with the lengthening shadows in that little one-room school, she pulled up her chair alongside of me, and she looked me in the eye. And it wasn't a teacher's eye. It was a parent's eye. And it glistened. And I saw a tear flow down her cheek. And I heard her, almost as if in the distance, almost as if I were witnessing another scene. And I was a principal actor watching myself on stage. I couldn't believe what she was saying. And that little wisp of a college girl, fresh out of her teacher training program, she looked at me and she said, George, I care too much about you to stand by supinely and watch you go over the precipice and destroy yourself. Don't you know, George, that time is the stuff that life is made out of? When you waste time, you waste life. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was quoting some very famous lines from the commencement address to all the youth of America. And she says, far off in the future, George, there's a man waiting to come into his time, waiting to come into his own and be a man among men, perhaps to be a leader among men. Will he be stillborn? You're giving him his legacy right now. What are you going to pass on to that man of the future? Well, maybe he will never be, because you killed him now. She said, this is not about arithmetic. This is not about how you cooperate with me in the classroom. George, you're my son, and I just love you too much to let you do this to yourself. I want to tell you, my friends, colleagues, the game was over. because she communicated to me that she had made that step from being just the mere professional, communicating to me sincerely and authentically that she was involved in my life. Bill Sands wrote his book, bestseller back in the late 60s, My Shadow Ran Fast. Hardened criminal. He was consigned to solitary confinement because he was dangerous to himself and to all the other inmates. When Warden Duffy walked in the room, he turned over against the wall and spit out from clenched teeth, "Go away, nobody cares." Warden Duffy, the only man that could walk in the prison yard unarmed among those hardened convicts, he just quietly said, "Bill, I care." Bill Sands wrote a book. He said, "I've heard a lot of words, heard a lot of counsel, heard a lot of invective, heard a lot of profanity, heard a lot of sewer talk. I've heard it all. But those two words got me by the shoulders and turned me around. I care." I represent another parent, and we both care a great deal about you. Schools can become so institutionalized, so professional, so efficient, so effective. The process is so well honed and oiled, the machinery runs well. And sometimes the driving gears of that process, the teachers forget that they have been assigned to be surrogate parents along the way. But there are 3 steps beyond, my friend. 3 steps beyond the low-level mere professional. We have the teacher in a Christian school who is pastor. I not only care about your body, I only care about your ethical character, I'm not only interested in the kind of person you're becoming as you grow into adulthood, but I'm interested in your soul. As I go around the world and we evaluate Christian schools, we ask for 10 or 15 of the students, and we say to them, to the faculty, give us some of your young saintlets, and give us some of the rowdies, give us some of the ruffians, give us some of the ragtags, give us some of the playboys, give us the whole spectrum, fellows and girls. We want a good mix. And then we go alone with them in the library or the dining hall and sit around a table. And we say, what's it like to be a student in this school? Has any pastor, any teacher, ever sat down with you alone and talked with you about a spiritual problem? We go around the circle, and head after head after head shakes no. I meet my teacher in the English classroom. I meet my teacher in his assignment on the ball field or in the shop. My teacher has never said, I want to talk with you one-on-one about some very important things. Nothing more important about your spiritual development, where you're going to spend eternity, your relationship to your Lord. If nobody's talked about that, you and I have the kind of relationship that we can talk about it. As I go around and talk to students, they seem to be telling us that we have turned over the pastoral responsibilities to the annual or semi-annual devotional speakers who come in with their revival meetings or weeks of prayer. We've turned it over to the deans. We've turned it over to the Bible teachers. We've turned it over to the campus chaplains. The academic technician along the assembly line feels no obligation in some institutions to do that work of the pastor. I remember I was walking home from one of those semi-annual revival services. The registrar fell in step alongside of me, and he was very quiet and pensive. And finally he said, George, why is it that we bring in a whirlwind evangelist with a hit the sawdust trail format to do the work in one short week, which we've been assigned to do every hour, every day, every month, all year long? work of the pastor. Then we ask the students, how many of your teachers have prayed with you? Occasionally, a hand will go up. Then we ask the question, how many of your teachers have come down on you when you made a mistake? Oh, all the hands went right up. We ask the question, has a faculty member ever prayed with you? And we find that many of the students feel that their faculty members have delegated, maybe even abdicated is the word, because in a Christian school, mothers and fathers and the church at large have given the work of Christian education to other adults to be professional, parent, pastor. But there's another step. You know what that is? That's the prophet. The prophet is not one that always sees visions. In fact, most of the prophets in the Old Testament didn't leave prophecies, timeline prophecies. They merely gave the message from the mountaintop. And they came down with the oracles. And they, as it were, put the looking glass up and said to the people, do you see yourself? In the background of that mirror is what God would like to have you be. Do you see any gap? Do you see any difference? What are you going to do about it? And so the Bible is full, and history is full of accounts of where that society killed the messenger that brought the bad news. And so many of the prophets were martyred. It's not a popularity contest. To be able to say, I am not speaking for myself. God says. It's in the sacred word. This book is not just another book. We'll talk about this a little later. This book is not just special leather, special pages, paper, print. The very life of God pulsates in the pages of this book. Do you believe that? The very breath of God is in this book. The power that spoke universes into existence and flung whole galaxies into being. Saw that which wasn't and made it real. That power that created is also the power that can recreate. That is the power that's available to us as Christian teachers. And when we come to speak for God, we're more than just the pastor who is there to nurture the spiritual character development of the student. We are standing alone at times and saying, I don't care what kind of a vote was taken, and 85% of the people believe such and such. You remember there were two men in the same vicinity. One was at the foot of the idol, and he was the consensus seeker, and he took a vote and gave the people what they wanted. Another one came down from the mountaintop with the oracles of God. You remember the story of Moses and Aaron? The true prophet is one who says, I am here to help you begin to think Christian, to begin to see people like God sees them, to begin to view things differently, to see the world from God's point of view. You know, that's extremely important. Our parents aren't sending their children to Christian schools just to get good math and good English and good history and hope that there will be a nice supporting environment. Bottom line to the whole endeavor is learning how to think Christian, to run everything through that Christian filter, God's holy word, the inspired utterances, and down at the bottom, the distilled, pure wisdom of the ages. To take the contemporary age in its fallen, perverse condition, throw it up against the backdrop of God's revealed will, so young people can say, maybe the majority is doing this, but God wants me to go this way. That's thinking Christian. That's the prophetic role. thinking out loud before students, modeling a way of looking at life, even at times coming from the mountaintop and saying, you're not going to like this. It may cut across the grain, but you need to know this is how God views this. It's in the Word. It's in the book. You defy this at your peril, my young friend. The teacher who is a popularity seeker, who wants to be in good with the kids, is revealing a great deal of immaturity because that teacher has not yet understood that one of the major assignments in a Christian school is to take on the prophetic role. There are two kinds of prophets. There's the prophet that forth speaks. And that prophet reads the future. God opens up the future for him. The other prophet is the one who pronounces on immediate situations in light of the principles of God's Word. He speaks forth. So you got the prophet that forth speaks, who reads the future, and you got the one who speaks forth, who declares unabashedly, boldly, and with conviction and clarity and unequivocation the will of God for that younger generation and for the society. Oh, we all like to be popular. We all like to be the good guys. We never want to cut across the popular sentiment or the trends of the times. But the Christian teacher is 3 steps above the mere professional, who is not afraid to say, on the authority of the Word of God, I can confidently declare to you that this is God's will for your life. Young people are looking for authority. They're looking for certainty. They want to know that there's something that they can hang on. Seems like every wall that they lean up against, it gives. They're always testing and pressing to see whether we really believe what God said. So the prophet and the school. When Christian schools are called schools of the prophets, that doesn't mean seminaries 300 years before Christ. That doesn't mean old Hebrew schools that passed off the scene of action and it's just an artifact of history. The modern schools of the prophets are filled with teachers and older students who confront. Ugly word, confront. Something happened to that word in the 60s. College young people waving banners, raised fists through clenched teeth, sitting around in sit-ins and marches and protests, demonstrations, confrontations they call it. There are other kinds of confrontations. When a counselor sits down with a client and lovingly, in a caring, compassionate way, says, would you like to own your problem? Wouldn't you like to admit to yourself and to God that you need supernatural assistance, you need outside help on this job? When you begin to admit that, then you have achieved the breakthrough. In psychology, that's called confrontation. It's not an angry word, it's not an ugly word, it's not a negative word. The prophet is one who is not afraid to confront for God. So the modern schools of the prophets are a cut above the whole society, on a mountaintop. In fact, some of the literature refers to Christian schools as mountaintop schools because they're living above the downward tug and the stain of this world. And the teachers are those who are in the prophetic role. So let's pause a moment and ask the question, are you in the prophetic role? When was the last time that you took the oracles of God and held them up and you said to a group of young people, I don't care what's being said on TV. I don't care how many of your peers are doing this. I don't care what the old-fashioned way was or the new-fashioned way is. I can just tell you this is what God says about it. And to do that in a way that deserves an answer. That's Christian confrontation, and that is the prophetic role. Now, all of these roles up to this point, my friends, are public roles. You're a professional in the classroom. You take on a parent role in your individual reaction with the students, interaction. Even in the pastoral role that may be public or private, prophetic role is often a public role. But there is one more role, which is the fifth step to the throne. This certainly marks the master Christian teacher. This is the teacher who goes into his prayer chamber, like John Knox, who wore out the floor alongside of his bed. And I understand if you're on the tourist circuit, you can go there and see that little cottage, where on his knees he pled before God and he said, "Give me Scotland or I die." Have you ever taken on your priestly role? The highest privilege that you have as a Christian teacher, to say, "I come to you, Holy Father, Elder Brother. I come to you, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, Holy Three. I stand with you against the enemy and the destructive work that he's trying to do in the life of John and Mary." One inspired author said that when we go into our prayer chamber in intercessory prayer for one of God's children, that we stand alongside of our elder brother in the Holy of Holies, and we are clothed in priestly vestments with a censer in our hand, and we join our high priest at the altar. No wonder Paul could say, "You're a peculiar people. You're a chosen generation." John the Revelator in Revelation 5 said, 1:5 says, "You're a kingdom of priests." Many teachers forget that that is their 30 megaton H-bomb to drop on the enemy. There is nothing he fears worse. You can call all the discipline committees you want. You can have all the parent-teacher consultations. You can write up all the anecdotal reports in the folder, but nothing will blast the fallow ground and open up the way for God, for changed lives, than those moments you spend talking to God about your students. The world may not know, but they'll see the effects. One little old teacher, retired, spent 30 years in a sod house frontier one-room school. Out of that school, in inordinate supply in comparison to the caliber of students coming in from those farms and ranches, out of that little classroom came doctors and nurses and teachers and mothers in Israel and Christian businessmen and mighty political leaders, statesmen. A veritable flow of goodness came out of that classroom. A bright young reporter going through some of the county records began to notice this phenomena. He discovered that this teacher was in a home for the aged. She was still very much alive, compos mentis. He says, "There's a story there." So he went to her and he said, "Mother, Adelaide will call her. You must have some secret. Don't let it pass with you. Share it with posterity. Your friends in the profession deserve it. All the generations that followed deserve it." What was the secret? This just didn't happen. He had to coax it out of her. He didn't expect what came. This was not a Christian school. This was a public school, but she was a Christian teacher. She said, "Oh," she says, "your readers won't be interested in that." He said, "Try me." She says, "It sounds kind of corny." He said, "Try me. I want to find out what took place in that classroom." Well, she says, every morning that I went to school and I put my hand on the doorknob, I just prayed a little prayer. Same prayer. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, same prayer. "Dear Lord, I declare this classroom an embassy of heaven in a world of revolt. Don't let my human weaknesses rise up and get in the way of what you are wanting to do in the lives of these students here today." Isn't that a marvelous prayer? Don't let my weaknesses get in the way, rise up and interfere with what you are trying to do with these young people. Let me be a part. And she declared that. a holy embassy, a spiritual ambassadorship in a revolted world. I read an account some time ago about a lady that inherited an old farmhouse in Canada. The last 3 families moved out within 6 weeks. They couldn't stand it. It was a haunted house. There was rattling in the attic. There was knocking on the panes. There were sounds of laughter out of nowhere in the night. There were footsteps, all kinds of strange and eerie things. And it wasn't Amityville. It was way up in the plains of Saskatchewan. Her husband couldn't be with her. He had to be home with the business. She had to be up there to claim the property. And she spent a winter in that Canadian wilderness in this old haunted farmhouse, so to speak. She walked in there with a Bible. She walked through the front door, and she says, I declare these premises holiness unto the Lord, holiness unto the Lord, holiness unto the Lord. She went into every room, every closet, every crook and cranny of that house, and she pronounced it the Lord's territory. Holiness unto the Lord. This teacher, little sod house, frontier, one schoolroom, school teacher. Before she went into her schoolroom, she declared that whole territory, holiness unto the Lord. She knew that she was more than just a professional. She understood that she was a parent. She understood that she would be a pastor that day, that she would have a prophetic role, and she began her private work of a priestly ministry. Well, the young reporter reeled before that, and he thought he had the story, but there was more coming. She said, Johnny, who sat over in this desk, didn't know who his father was, had a terrible identity crisis. It came out, his reaction, his sublimation, his substitution, all kinds of compensatory negative behavior came out because he didn't know who his daddy was. She went to his desk. She says, Dear Lord, I dedicate this territory around here. I dedicate this desk. I dedicate what's going to happen in this area today. Only God can work here. I claim it in Jesus' name. Here's little Ruth who sits here. Ruthie's got a temper. She boils over and scalds everybody in sight. There's a scene every day. And kids are being hurt and they're sent out crying. And the teacher said I had to spend half my time just mopping up after Ruthie. She said I would go there and I say, Dear Lord, there are times when I want to just get hold of her and shake her. That spirit doesn't come from you. So Lord, get it out of me now. Don't let the day start. Get it out of me now. And she said, I dedicate Ruthie's desk. She went from desk to desk, and she dedicated by name every student 1 hour before they came to class. Do you think it's any wonder that out of that classroom came those kind of young people to salt the society? That, my friend, is the priestly role. Maybe we need less discipline committees and more prayer bands. Maybe we need more people alone in their closets saying, I claim Harry for your eternal kingdom. The enemy cannot have him. Friends, is the highest step on the throne to masterful Christian teaching. Peter had just denied his Lord. And the Lord asked him 3 questions for him to reverse that and cancel it out, that testimony he had made before the witnessing universe. He says, do you love me more than these fish, Peter? Do you love me more than this commerce around here, Peter? Do you love me more than all of these people that are eager to hear some great preaching and curious about what's going on? Peter said, yes, Lord. Then he said, be a shepherd. Take care of my sheep. You see, he committed Peter to a priestly ministry. So in closing up our little presentation this morning, what is the essence of a Christian school? It isn't library. It isn't the fine supporting props. This is just scaffolding. This is just setting. It isn't a beautiful campus, although a beautiful campus in a nice, serene country atmosphere can contribute to the solitude and the quiet, reflective life that's opposed to a life of excitement, which the enemy in the world wants to give. It isn't the paper of the institution. Some institutions rate themselves by the number of dissertations, the number of publications, and the number of white papers and position papers and all the publications of the faculty, or even the paper that they carry, the pedigree of the faculty. It isn't the plant. It isn't the paper. It isn't even the program. Sometimes we think if we can just schedule the student, build the assembly line, have everything very well honed and all the little parts working, we put a lot of faith in that program, system, organization, institutionalization. And we can delegate to other specialists, and we can delegate to the system and to the program and hope that the assembly line will do its work, and on the other end will be the product. The real power of an institution is people. Everything else is scaffolding and props. The very essence of a Christian school are teachers who have gone 4 steps beyond the mere professional. So in closing, I would like to ask, have you settled for this level, my friend? Are you saying to your students, I'm involved in your life. I'm a surrogate parent. I happily accept the responsibility. I love you like your own mom or dad. I suffer when you suffer. I rejoice when you succeed. Have you carried a student upon your soul? Have you talked to him about his eternal destiny and his work with his master? I had a boy tell me once when I was a dean, I've been here 2 years. I've been waiting for somebody to invite me. Somebody to say, it's a wonderful thing to be a part of God's family. You will never regret it. He said, nobody ever invited me, Dean. That's why I haven't made the step. Are you waiting for the week of prayer speaker to be pastor? Waiting for the campus chaplain to be pastor? You're going to let the deans do it? They are assigned that. And so the student says, well, he's just doing his job. He's another careerist. But you talk about credibility. You let somebody who is doing it out of the fullness of his heart and a deep, irrepressible urge, and you're talking about pure, unadulterated credibility. That's the pastoral role. The loving confrontation who says, I bring you good news from the kingdom from off the mountaintop. It may cut across the grain, but I can tell you on the authority of God's word, that's what God's plan is for your life. Follow it, and you won't be sorry. And then finally, I want to ask you, is there some student on this campus, some student anywhere in your experience in your classroom that rubs you the wrong way? Then you've got an appointment in that quiet chamber to talk with God about it. Is there some student who is destroying himself, almost as if he's a wild animal with a ring in his nose being led down to destruction? Have you gone to God and say, God, our program can't help. Our system isn't helping. None of us have helped. I don't seem to be able to have helped. Help, Lord. Supernatural assistance. We want a miracle. We're claiming a miracle in that life. If you want to see things start happening in the lives of your students, take that 5th step on the throne to masterful Christian teaching. And may God make each one of us 4 steps beyond, not content to stop at the mere professional, but to do the work of a teacher, to be faithful to our calling, to be a parent, to be a pastor, to be a prophet, and to be a priest for our students. What a wonderful invitation. Isn't it a great work to be in? Who wouldn't want to be a Christian educator? That's why we are all over the world moving the Christian teacher into a position of recognition in the sacred ministry of teaching, in recognition that there are 4 steps beyond the mere professional.